Hey all, Chris Sika here from the Ronin Society. I'm going to talk to you today about revenue forecasting for an e-commerce business. I've created a template that you'll be able to download that will help you with forecasting the traffic to your website, the number of orders that you'll be able to get from that traffic, and ultimately allow you to decide on things like return on ad spend and budgeting and planning for how you're going to grow your e-commerce business. A lot of the owners that we work with of e-commerce businesses are looking to scale and grow something bigger than themselves. That means building scalable systems and scalable processes that can be operated without the key person or persons involved in the business. So to do that, it requires building out templates and using tools that other people can audit, other people can use to inform decision making, and can help you plan for the future of the business. And that means forecasting. So for this template, I'm going to go ahead and assume that as an e-commerce business owner, you're at least a little bit familiar with the general idea of a funnel. You're familiar with the AIDA funnel, awareness, interest, decision, action. I'm going to assume that you have some sort of funnel built out. And the goal of today's exercise is to help you figure out how you're going to forecast sessions to your site and future revenue and expenses based on the existing data that you have access to. Most forecasts are divided into new customer acquisition and existing customer retention. Everybody kind of knows that it costs more to get a new customer than to get an existing customer to return. And we're going to see that play out in some numbers today. That being said, there are a lot of exceptions and different strategies that businesses take. Some companies are interested in acquiring new customers at almost any cost and are willing to lose money on those customers initially because they're just looking for market share. Other businesses are focused on profitability and figuring out how to acquire new customers for as little as possible, and really are more focused on encouraging existing customers or previous customers to return. So we'll see that play out in the numbers today as well. And there's really a couple different scenarios that would cause someone to want to do some forecasting for their e-commerce business. Maybe they have a new e-commerce site. Maybe you have a plan, or you want to create a plan for next quarter or next year. Maybe you want to overhaul or rethink your e-commerce strategy. Or if you're like most of the clients of the Ronin Society, you are looking to standardize your process to get visibility into what's working and what's not working, and come up with a repeatable framework that's going to allow you to hand off that decision-making process to other people on your team, or to decrease the amount of time it takes for you to make those decisions. There's always going to be a cost-benefit analysis around how detailed you want to be with your forecasting. There's a lot of variables. How available and accurate is the data, and what data are you able to access? How much time and bandwidth do you and your team have to not only collect this data and do this analysis, but also how much time do you actually have to implement some of the strategies that this data is going to provide? What level of expertise do you have on your team to actually process the information that is available from these data sources? And how much of it is actually actionable for your business? How much of this stuff will you actually be able to do something about based on the resources that your business has? So knowing all that, all those prefacing, we've looked at a bunch of e-commerce models, and we've seen that some are extremely detailed and some are extremely high level. The question you have to ask as a business owner is, what's most appropriate for your business at the current stage that it's at? Are you in the founder stage, the operator stage, the asset stage, or the expansion stage? As a business moves through those different stages, there's obviously more resources available to spend on dialing in your dashboards and getting a lot more accurate and granular with data. So before we jump into the model, let's start with some first principles. There are 6 first principles that we're going to use to build out our tool. And the first one is that sessions are more important than unique visitors. Some people are going to come to your site one time and then they're never going to come back. But some people are going to come back. And the odds are that the more engagement that comes from an individual, the higher the likelihood of a purchase. So we should be willing to pay for and take the time to do the activities that create more sessions, even from the same unique visitor, because it increases the likelihood of a conversion. As a result, we choose to use sessions and not unique visitors for the top of our funnel. The second principle is that sessions occur on purpose. People get to your website from one of potentially many different channels or sources, but they are there because of things that we have chosen to do on purpose. Now, people don't accidentally enter random letters and just happen to spell out, your company's URL. They either heard about you through word of mouth, seeing your company in someone's content or in your own content, or maybe through some sort of paid effort to get in front of their eyes, PR, paid social. The third principle is that we have finite resources, and that means we can't use all the channels. There are so many different ways that we can drive sessions to our site, but all of them require either money, time, or both. So because of the finite resources, we have to look at what's working and what's not working as a long-term strategy and spend our time where we think we're going to get the best return. The fourth principle is that an investable asset or an investable, business or asset stage business requires visibility and frameworks for decision making. If you want to have a business that's going to become an asset for you, meaning it's a business that will be able to continue to operate whether you're highly involved or not, you'll need to standardize your activities so that they're measurable in a way that makes it easy for people that aren't you or the founders, meaning management, to decide what's working, what's not working, and to make changes accordingly. The fifth principle is that some people will never buy, some people will buy once, some people will buy multiple times, and some people will essentially buy forever. This does create the dichotomy of customer acquisition versus customer retention. The last principle is that payback periods should be under 1 year. Because some people will buy forever, that's wonderful, and we obviously want those people, but because forever is difficult to forecast, we choose to use 1 year as a timeline because it's a little bit easier for modeling and understanding your business, and any investment in customer acquisition that has a payback period greater than a year is a lot riskier. So we really want to try to focus on things that are going to help get a return in under 12 months. So knowing these principles, let's jump into our template and walk through some of the logic for how we do our forecasting. Now that we know our first principles, let's think about some basic forecasting mechanics. Again, there are a bunch of ways that you can drive traffic to your site. You can use SEO and content, Google AdWords, social, paid social. You can go on Pinterest, you can use Twitter, you can do display ads through Google and Facebook, you can do retargeting campaigns, you can send emails to your email list, you can run a PR strategy, you can do workshops and events. The list is significant. Before we jump into our template, there are 4 things that we're going to be forecasting to get to our total sessions. So for each one of these channels, there's a total reach, there's actual activities that are performed in that channel, there's a conversion rate to sessions, and then there's the total number of sessions from those activities for that channel. For total reach audience, it's a little different depending on the traffic source. For emails, your total audience is the number of emails you have in your list. For Insta posts that are organic, it's the total number of followers you have. For Insta paid, it's the total number of dollars you're spending, generally per month. For blog posts, it's total traffic to individual blog posts. For PR, it's total visitors to the article or PR blast that's being done. Actual activities is really important because it's going to affect our planning and budgeting. Ultimately, we have to decide what we are or are not going to do as a business. So for emails, activity is going to be the number of emails we send. For Insta organic, it's the number of posts or stories that we post. For paid social, it's the number of campaigns or ad sets that we run. The third one is conversion rate to sessions. Conversion rate to sessions is where we ask ourselves what portion of our reach is going to convert into a session. So for email, we see ranges between 1% and 10% of people that get emailed coming to the site. For Pinterest, similar range. For paid social, we can use historical data or comps that other people are getting on average to figure out what number of sessions we're going to get per dollar we spend. Total sessions per activity is where we multiply or divide, depending on the traffic source, the reach, the activity, and the conversion rate to get the expected number of sessions for that channel based on the amount of activity that we're going to do as a business. So why do we forecast sessions? One last time. 3 big things that can come from forecasting sessions. The first one is scenario planning. What if we increase our activity in one channel? What would that cost to us? Do we have the bandwidth as a team to do it? Does the conversion rate and the sessions we're getting from one of our channels justify maybe a new hire? Who's going to do all this work? How will we stay on track for that level of activity? Who do we hold accountable? Do we need an outside expert to help? How much will that cost, like a marketing agency? Second thing is sales forecasting. We can apply a average order value to get our sales forecast based on, sessions and a conversion rate. So the other thing we can do is we can also look at all this work and figure out what kind of expenses are going to be required to do it. Will we have paid ad spend? Will we have agency fees or consulting fees? We can put them into our expense forecast to see if we're going to be able to afford these things or if we need to budget them out over time. The third thing we'll be able to do is inventory planning. Based on a number of customers, we can get a better forecast on what sales velocity will be by SKU or by bundle, rather than relying on historical sales velocities to predict stock outs, things like that. So that's why we do all this forecasting. So now let's jump into the template that you'll be able to download and walk through some of these examples to see what they look like. So here we have our e-commerce session forecasting tool. We're looking at the year 2021. We have our months across the top here, and we have various traffic sources that we're going to model out. So just to give you an idea of the mechanics here, like I said before, each of these sources has a reach, activity, conversion rate, and total number of sessions that it outputs. Now, for certain channels, some of those things are collapsed because of just the nature of the channel, and I'll walk through that as well. But what this all is going to sum up to is a total number of sessions per month that we're then going to apply a conversion rate to and an average order value to get our total number of orders and our revenue. We're then going to walk through a little bit more to show you some ROAS and contribution margin, but that comes a little bit later. So let's start at the top here and walk through what this thing is telling us. Let's start at the top here with our email list. So let's make an assumption about January's activity for our email list. We're going to assume that the business has about 5,000 emails and that we're going to send 4 emails, so 1 email per week roughly. And then we're going to assume that roughly 5% of those people end up going to the website. And that's going to get us a total number of email-based sessions for January of 1,000. We also make some other assumptions about the rest of the year. We've put in a month-over-month growth multiple for our email list and decided that we're going to say that our email list is going to grow by about 5% every month. That's going to put us from 5,000 in January to roughly 8,000 in December. As you can see from activity, we're going to keep the number of emails we send out consistent. We'll talk about seasonality and adjusting for our retail calendar later. But, for example, in November, when we have Black Friday and we have Cyber Monday, we're probably going to send out more emails than that. There's also going to be other holidays and other sales that we're going to probably increase our emails for. So we'll adjust those accordingly later. So that's emails, right? Pretty simple logic. Let's look at Instagram. So we're going to assume that this business has 3,000 Instagram followers and that they're going to post between their feed and their stories. They're going to post like 16 times a month. We're going to assume that about 2% of their followers end up on the website based on the posts that we do. That's going to put us at 960 emails in January, but we're also going to assume that their Instagram followers grows by about 5% a month for the rest of the year as well. So then we're going to look at Instagram and Facebook ad spend. We put those together because it's the same platform, but we're going to assume that this business is going to do $3,000 a month in ad spend. We're also going to make an assumption about is the average cost per session. What's really interesting about paid spend is that the reach and activity are actually kind of collapsed into one, because when you do ad sets and campaigns, they tell you the reach that ad set and campaign can get. And so the real lever that you have to pull is how much you're willing to spend if you go paid. So what we're going to put in here is an assumption that it costs us about 25 cents per session. And that's a metric that you can get from Campaign Manager. So if we spend $3,000 in January and it costs us about 25 cents to get an impression or to get a session, then we're going to end up with about 12,000 sessions from Instagram and Facebook. Now let's look at a blog. Let's assume by looking at our blog or looking at Google Analytics, we're getting on average about 500 visitors per blog post to our site. And if we have 5 blog posts, we're averaging about 2,500 sessions because of our blog. I leave a little bit of extra space in here for organic search. Some people like to have a separate tab for organic and other. Maybe you do some podcasts that you do some work with or an affiliate program. You could obviously model those things out. In this example, I've just left them as placeholders. So let's say we get about 100 sessions a month from people just happen to find us on a random search, and 100 from other just random ways that we pop up that we're maybe not sure of. What we do is we sum up all of those sessions to get to 16,000 sessions for the month of January. And what we can do then is apply a conversion rate, meaning some percent of that session traffic converts into a customer. We're going to use 2%, it's a healthy industry average, and we're going to apply our average order value and call that $40. What that's going to tell us is that we have about 333 orders that we're forecasting in January. That's 16,000 times 2%. And when you multiply those orders by the average order value, you get your revenue. So that's about 13,300. So before I jump down into the rest of the financials, I'm going to just show you that there's a couple cool things that you can do before we go into scenario planning that are helpful to know about. So wherever there's a blue, that's an input and it'll change the model, and the black is all outputs. So let's assume that the email list grows at 10% instead of 5%. That'll change up there. If we decide that we're going to send way more emails than is listed here, then we can change that there. And if we think, say, the conversion is actually a lot lower on emails to sessions, we can put that in there. If we want to send less Instagram posts, we can put that there, change our conversion here, and we can obviously change our ad spend here, or if we want to manually override it by months, we can do that there. Also, we can make assumptions about how much it costs to get a session. Say 30 bucks would be too much, so let's put in 30 cents here. And then there's a couple other unique little inputs as well. You can forecast your Instagram follower growth rate. You can maybe forecast that your cost per session is going to go down as you get better. I put in -2% here per month. So we see that it costs 30 cents at the beginning of the year and 24 cents at the end of the year, averaging about 27 cents for the year. Sessions per blog, I've put in a growth rate for the number of blog posts. So in this example, this business would be putting in roughly one new blog post a month or every 2 months for the first half of the year. And then it looks like they're putting one in a month after that. Organic search, I left without any kind of logic. And that's how we get to our total sessions throughout the year. So that's our total sessions forecast. The next part of this is, how does this apply to the actual business, and how are we going to take actionable insights from this, right? So that's where we get into what we call scenario planning. We're going to start by looking at, expand this a little bit. Let's start by looking at the revenue that's generated by this activity. So we're seeing about $173,000 in total revenue generated from this activity alone. We're going to make an assumption about COGS. So that's your cost of goods. That's how much it costs for the actual product itself. That includes duties, shipping, tariffs, any of that kind of thing to get it into your hands. And we're going to assume that's at 50%. And then we're going to pull that out to get our gross profit. That's where a lot of people stop, but it's really important to go below gross profit and look at our contribution margin. Contribution margin includes any kind of variable selling and fulfillment costs that go along with earning that revenue. So I'm going to list a couple out here. The first one is I'm going to put agency fees in. I put in an assumption of 4,000, which you can change over here. And then ad spend, I have that linked up to the ad spend up above in the channel. I then put in an assumption about shipping. Some people actually make a little bit of money on shipping. Some people lose a little bit of money on shipping. I put 2% in here as just a healthy assumption. You can obviously change that, but that is linked to the assumption tab over here on the right. The logic is basing it off of this percentage times total revenue for that month. So the shipping was $225, meaning we didn't collect all of the shipping that it cost us to get these products out to customers. And then merchant fees, I put that at 3%. You can obviously change that over here, but that's going to cost us about $337 for the month. This is where we get to something interesting, which is contribution margin. So we take our revenue, we subtract out our product COGS to get our gross profit, and then we subtract out any variable expenses that were incurred during that month in order to get that revenue. And our contribution margin, we notice, is negative, which means that for this business in this month, this $11,000 just isn't cutting it. We're not making enough money to even cover our contribution costs, much less our fixed costs, meaning our people's salaries, our rent, that sort of thing. So we're going to come back to that in a second and use that for some scenario planning. One other thing I wanted to point out is there's a couple different ways to calculate ROAS, and I didn't want to get too complex with it, so I did two of the more simple versions. The simplest one is to do ROAS without agency fees, which is where you take your total revenue and divide your ad spend into it. And then I did a second one where you include agency fees to see what your ROAS is with the agency fees. And I think that's important to do because technically, even if you got rid of the agency, you'd have to hire somebody to manage those ads. So those are still costs. Now let's look at this business from a scenario planning perspective. We look at contribution margin and we notice that we're actually going to lose in total about $8,800. You see that sum down there just on this scenario, right? So we have to think about, is this sustainable? Is this something we're willing to do? Do we think that these customers are going to continue to come back? Is it worth losing money to get, let's see how many total customers we end up with here. Total orders. So during our time of losing money, we're going to get 2,620 customers. Is that worth it to us? Not sure. And I don't want to dive into LTV in this example, because again, we want to look at payback periods under 1 year. So we have to think about this as a business and say, all right, well, what if we can increase the number of emails we send? Okay, might be helpful. We see our total that we've lost come down a little bit, down to 7,600. So maybe we should invest in doing a much better job with our email content and figuring out how to do better product drops and sales and stuff like that to get more people coming to the site through our emails. Maybe we decide that we're just going to go crazy on our Instagram, and that's just going to be how we're going to do it. We see that number come down a little bit. We're down to 6,900 in negative contribution at this point. What if we can negotiate with the ad agency and get them down to $3,500 a month? Okay, that helped significantly. And what if we can figure out a way to increase our order value? Like, what if we can figure out how to do some bundles or figure out how to do some attachments in the cart to try to increase our order value? Now we see that our contribution margin loss is much less. We're going to lose about $1,000 over the course of the first 3 months, and then it's going to start to become profitable for the next 3 quarters of the year. We would also see a slightly higher ROAS without agency fees and approaching something pretty healthy close to the end of the year with agency fees. So this gives you a flavor for how you can do some of this stuff and how you can do some scenario planning. The big question comes up next, which is, what do you do with that information? Once we've done some of that scenario planning, a lot of businesses realize, wow, we need to be a lot more strategic about how we acquire customers, and we need to be a lot more strategic about how we retain customers. That's going to inform things like, how do we capture more emails? How do we make our products more recurring? How do we increase our order value? All those things are different strategies that you can employ, and you can let the numbers help you decide what's going to be the most appropriate for you, what's going to be the most expensive, and which ones you're actually going to be capable of affording. You know, maybe you decide that you want to use product launches more regularly, or maybe you decide that you want to push bigger sales, or maybe you decide that you want to use a consignment model and have less inventory on your books. There's a lot of different factors that play there. You know, maybe we can drive more organic search by better researched blogs and potentially hire a copywriter who's versed in SEO. Or maybe we consider, you know, applying seasonality to this calendar and maybe some other like retail stuff to figure out if we're going to get a bigger lift in November than maybe we thought. Once we've accounted for all of our scenarios and we think we have an idea of what we can afford and what works best for our business strategy, then we have to assign these things to people, hold them accountable to doing them, and track our progress. The power of a finance team is that they're already in the habit of looking at targets, collecting actuals, and seeing where we hit, where we exceeded, and where we missed our targets. That information allows us to decide if maybe the strategy isn't working, maybe the person who owns the strategy isn't doing a great job, or maybe we need more time or resources. So it helps us directionally figure out where there's a coachable moment. The last step to this thing is learning how to connect the business's incentives with those of the people that are owning these metrics. Once you've done that and their benefit equals the business's benefit, you've gotten a lot closer to an asset stage business. Hopefully this was helpful. Download the template. If you are looking to get to the asset stage or the expansion stage, or you just want to chat about getting some better visibility, doing a better job with building out frameworks, or if this stuff's just exciting or interesting to you and you own a business, let's talk. I love talking about this stuff. So if you want to get to the asset or expansion stage where you're already there and you're looking to do it faster, let's talk.